clergy colleague, the late Max Kutz, who wrote, "We need a celebration that speaks the spring-inspired word about life and death, about us as we live and die through all the cycling seasons, days, and years. We need the sense of divinity to crack our hard, brown December husks, to push life out of inner tombs and outer pain. Unless we move the seasons of the self, and spring can come for us, the winter will go on and on. Easter will remain a myth, and life will never come again, despite the outer fact of spring. On this cold day that should be warm, we lift our hearts in warmth, that we may summon the warmth inwardly and display it outwardly on this festive day. For this, too, is a day which the Lord has made. And so let us rejoice.
This is the day the Lord hath made. This is the day the Lord hath made. Let us rejoice in it and be glad. Be glad.
And here is your chance to be glad with us. Our first and opening hymn is Hosanna in the Highest, which phrase Hosanna is part of that very psalm from which the choir spoke their words. So shall we join together in hymn number 262, a Palm Sunday hymn. you sound wonderful this morning. Thank you. Have a seat, please. Just a word for those who are perhaps new to us or fresh into our community. This is Fountain Street Church celebrating its 150th anniversary as a congregation this year. And in fact, we passed the formal moment just a week or two ago when the two Baptist churches that had quarreled for years decided to bury their hatchets and join together into one community. And boy, has it been a ride ever since. Because that is our past, but it is certainly not our future, because those were two Baptist churches. But sometime about a half a century after they started being Baptist, they started losing their way and fell into the pit of sin and heresy, and we've been grateful for that ever since. Fountain Street Church has been a liberal church in the Baptist tradition, in the Christian tradition, and in the spiritual tradition that encompasses all eager hearts wherever they wish to proclaim their hope. This church around us is 90-some years old and contains our history running from the scriptures on my right to history on my left. We are especially glad to have Charles Darwin looking down upon this pulpit on a regular basis, reminding us that the genius of the human spirit does not live between the covers of any book, but only within the folds of the human spirit. We are glad you're here today, and if you are new to us and want to look around, try to find me for just a moment after church, or join me for a discussion of my message as we get together below stairs at 12:30. And all other things being equal, though, the coffee is hot, the hearts are warm, and you are a part of this community as long as you are with us, be it a day or a lifetime, because we are here so that you may free your mind and grow your soul and change your world. And that's what we're here to do each and every day. Welcome to Fountain Street Church, and welcome to our wonderful choir who will give us uplifting moments. So technically, we're out of Lent. This is the end point. But if you mark the beginning, you should mark the end. And so I'm going to get to the last part. I and you've been thinking about sampling different ways to be contemplative in your bodies, not just thinking, but doing things. I challenged a few of you to try to make your own bread with your own sourdough starter. Mine failed already once, and I had to do it again. As I told someone else, there is nothing more spiritually humbling than admitting defeat to one-celled animals. We tried other things like Qigong, which is a Chinese discipline of settling your soul by moving. I wish I could do it. We did a couple of other things too, and I saved the last one because it's suitable to the occasion, this being Palm Sunday, and that's pilgrimage. I mention this because it's something that not just Christians do. Let's go to the next slide, okay, Doug? That's obviously a late medieval rendering of Chaucer's pilgrims heading off to Canterbury. The road does not look like that. That's, shall we say, fanciful. It's straighter, let me put it that way. In fact, the road, next slide, starts here. And that's a picture of where the Tabard Inn used to stand, which is no longer present. It should be pointed out the story is fictional, but the spaces along the way are very actual. And it is April, and that's a good reason to bring it up because I was hoping Charlie Gallmeyer would be here because he loves to recite this from memory. But it says at the beginning of the Canterbury Tales, when that April with his showered soot the drought of March hath pierced to the root, and bathed every vein in such sweet liquor, of which virtue engendered is the flower. When Zephyrus eke with his sweet breath inspired hath in every holt and heath the tender crops, and the young sun hath in the ram his half-course run, and small fowls making melody that sleepen all the night with open eye, so pricketh him nature in her courages, then folks longing to go on pilgrimages. And it goes on. Befell that in the season of the day, in Southwark at the Tabard as I lay, ready to wenden on my pilgrimage to Canterbury with full devout courage. And so I was. A few years back, I went to this very spot, stood right there, and then walked all the way to Canterbury. Cliff, show them how far I had to go. It's a much straighter road. In fact, it's a Roman road that runs all the way from Southwark through Deptford, Greenwich, all those places, all the way down to Canterbury. The Roman road is now actually a main artery in England. There's a 6-lane highway over the top of it, but little pieces of it remain. And I walked through a number of villages and through the city of London, by the way, and walked right past David Lockington's home because he used to live right on the street. I didn't know that till afterward. And it's like walking through Lansing. Nothing particularly remarkable, but you're doing the same thing. In the sense that it's just shops and homes and traffic. It's about 90 miles. Did it in about 5-6 days. And I loved doing that because it wasn't the first time. That's probably the one you know most, along with this next one, Cliff. See the scallop over here? That's a marker that's all throughout the Camino de Santiago, which starts all the way back in France. And there are a number of trails that all go to the cathedral in Santiago, Spain. And this one is just an example of those markers. And whichever way the scallop points, meaning the sunburst look, that's the way you go. So if it were straight up, you go straight ahead, left, right. If you're doing this way, it means you're going the wrong way. But there are many paths, and I did not take the whole path, which would have taken many weeks. I took a shorter version called the Camino Inglés. I think that's the next slide. Yep. See where it says Ferrol up there? That's the city. That's actually the city from which the Armada left to get obliterated by the British. And you walk that distance, which I did. And that's over 100 kilometers, which qualified me for what they call a credencial, proof that you've walked it. Of course, was it open the day I arrived? No. You'll have to take me at my word. I have no official record of having done that. And the best part about this is, A, it's a week, B, it's really green. Most of northern Spain is rather dry, but this is up against the ocean, and it's really rather verdant. Let's go to the next slide, can't we, Dave? There's another marker, but you can tell it's not in Spain. It's in Japan, along a Buddhist Shinto path that I walked before I went to Canterbury, but after I went to Spain. This is called the Kumano Kodo. It's a pilgrimage path that goes across a peninsula, and you stop at a variety of shrines, and you purify yourself over a period of about, only about 50 miles, but I think 90% of it is vertical. At least my body remembers a lot of climbing, and that's the path. See those roots down there in that person? That's as good a path as it's often. It was hard. It was worth it. We'll show you the path next, okay, Cliff? Like I said, it doesn't go far. I started at what is called Takajiri Oji, which is the beginning, and I walked all the way around the Nachi no Otaki Falls and the Kumano Nachi Taisha. So it was actually a circular route. And it's one of the most remote regions in Japan, which is hard to find because Japan's a very populated country, but this region is very, very forested. And by the way, very wet. If you go on pilgrimages of any kind, you will get soaked to the bone. Just get used to that fact. And once you get, I've also discovered something else. After you've been standing in the rain for 20 minutes, you can't get any wetter than that. So pretty much at that point, you just go. So let's go to the next slide, can we? But I also did a pilgrimage of a kind here in Michigan. This is the White Pine Trail. It starts technically at Comstock Park, although you can start in Riverside Park, which I did, and some of you went along with me. That's 100 miles all the way up to Cadillac. And believe it or not, that was harder in many ways than those other pilgrimages. Why? Much of it is asphalt. And that's hard on the feet. The only time I ever got blisters walking was in Michigan. But once you get north of Sand Lake, let's look at the next picture. It ceases being asphalt, and it looks like that, and it's wonderful. It's a former railway path, so it's really straight, and it doesn't go up. But it doesn't go up at a precipitous angle, but it goes up the whole way, because the northern part of the Lower Peninsula is higher up in elevation than we are. But I commend it to you, and don't just get on your bike and go up to Rockford and run around. Get up to Sand Lake, because when you get up that way, you encounter the Amish community, and there's nothing more interesting than walking down a roadway, walking down a path, and having buggies coming at you. And they're very pleasant people. They'll say hi. Next slide. Okay. I have a dream. I have a dream that at some point I'll be able to walk this path. See where it says Canterbury? Way up there. See where it says Rome? That's 1,000 miles. Yeah. It's a dream, believe me. But it starts in the very place where I stopped. And it was, as you can tell by the legend there, it was the path followed by Bishop Sigeric in the year 990. So it's a really old pilgrimage route to Rome. And if you see that city in the middle, Besançon, I have family there, so I'm kind of hoping I can at least go that far. So that's what I do. Now I want to ask you what pilgrimages you want to go on. And I'll be mentioning the fact that you actually don't have to go anywhere to be a pilgrim. It is about taking your body in an intentional way on a journey that's as much inward as outward. Lent is about making your life about something. And I'll say more about that in my sermon. Do I have any more slides left? Or is that the last one? Yep, that's what it will look like if I ever get there. 1,000 miles. Who knows? But I look forward to going back to Canterbury and dreaming at least. So find your pilgrimage. Because even people who can't walk still have places to go. And even people who can't go still have dreams they have to follow. And that's really what Lent is all about. Find your pilgrimage. That's what we're here to do, because this is the Pilgrim Church, after all, always on its way to something new. Wow, I'm done with all this Lent stuff. Is the choir going to help me out now? Fantastic. I love this text. You'll hear it later. We're beginning to get applications for our social action grant process. For those who don't know, the money that goes into the plate, the cash, becomes part of our social justice ministry, a very key part of it. What happens is we collect it, and during the year, twice a year, we invite organizations working for justice and decency to apply for grants. So we have some criteria. The criteria they have to meet are nonprofit and all that kind of good stuff. For us, though, it's that they echo and extend our values. We want to be involved in doing things that matter to us, but for which we don't have the resources. So partnership is a big deal. So a lot of groups are applying, and they're coming into my mailbox, and the committee is meeting. But I want to take a look. I'm just saying down here, each Sunday, all offerings of unmarked cash. And that makes me wonder, is there marked cash? I'd like you to think about marking your cash. That is to say, making sure it has your name on it, not physically. Because when you give money to the offering, it might be like, well, I'm done with it. And I want you to invert that process. You have just bought a share in an endeavor. So the outcome is really about you. You're not just giving money, you're making an investment. So I encourage you to consider putting as much money in there as you would care about if it fell out of your pocket. So if $1 fell out of your pocket and it wouldn't matter to you, you got to give more because you wouldn't care about it. I want you to care about the money you put in because I want you to care about the outcomes of the social life. It's a spiritual thing. If you don't, just go there. Because it's not enough that we do this. We have to care about it as well. That's what makes us a church and not a charity. So I want you to care enough about what you put in the plate, that you care about what happens, so that you care about what we must do to keep on doing what must be done. Yes, I'm being earnest, but it's Palm Sunday. It's time to be earnest. So think about that. How much money would I care about? That offering put in the plate, which we will now most gratefully receive. Couple of readings, one of which you already heard. My title today comes from a passage in Paul's letter to the Romans, and this Sunday and next Sunday will be the conclusion of my long wrestling match with Paul. And so I'm singling out a portion out of the middle of the letter that, well, it's one of the most rhetorically powerful. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulations, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword? As it is written, for thy sake we are killed all day long. We are accounted as sheep for the slaughter. Nay, In all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God. My second passage you just heard because the choir sang it, but I'll read it so you can hear the words and kind of let them sit inside you. This is Emily Dickinson. Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Success in circuit lies, too bright for our infirm delight, the truth's superb surprise, as lightning to the children eased with explanation kind. The truth must dazzle gradually, or every man be blind. Such days as this remind me of our youth, when we, ensconced in April cold because we lived among the hills around the Quabbin Reservoir, drove in our old green Chevy westward through the forests, which stood leafless still like men who wake with rumpled skin and stubble. Tired of the cold, we drove too fast, roaring down the hills until the Quaker meeting house appeared, upright and plain and pure, which marked the road that took us down and down. Again we sped, until the snow was gone and bits of green, timid, pale, and furtive, appeared on branches. The road became a street, the hill a flat, and houses came up close. The sun came through the windshield, bringing warmth with light, for here had spring arrived, yawning yet, but sure. We drove a gentler pace and climbed a gentle hill toward the center with its shops and students. But just a bit before, demurely on the right, a simple house and simple sign, so small one had to look on purpose to know this was the place she lived and died, the Bell of Amherst. What has this to do with Paul or church or Palm Sunday? I'm not sure, but as I was pondering my message, the words of Emily Dickinson were sung last week came to mind, and that kept coming back to me. Something is being told to me here because the memory seems to have caught me. We lived way up in the western hills of Massachusetts. First 5 years of my professional life, high up enough so that spring did not want to come till long after it had arrived elsewhere. But we knew that if we got in the car and drove around the reservoir, we could be in the Pioneer Valley and find spring. And so we did that more than once, and then also in the fall. We passed her house so many times. Did we ever go inside? Not once. I have learned to pay attention to what my mind insists on thinking, even when it doesn't make obvious sense. But then something came to me. It was that poem I read to you earlier, Tell the Truth, Tell the Whole Truth, but tell it slant. Palm Sunday is a well-known story, and we think we know what it's about. We all know the basics. Jesus obtains a donkey, an ass, an animal of low repute, suitable for carrying sticks and hay, not kings or messiahs. He then rides down to Jerusalem, his disciples paving the way with waving palms in a mocking parody of royal entry. Bystanders see it, and they join in, and they call out verses from the hymn, from the psalm we number as 118. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This is the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes. This is the day which the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Yes, that very psalm. It is the opening act, of course, something we call Passion Week. And I use the term act quite deliberately. Everything that follows seems to be intentional, if not planned. The assault on the temple, the Last Supper, the arrest, the trial, the crucifixion, and the empty tomb. It is an orchestrated story. So much like a drama that people actually conduct it as a drama. There's a centuries-long tradition in Oberammergau, Germany, where the town itself takes on the roles of all these characters, and they practice for a year. And the poor fellow who's called Judas finds his business suffering all the time. Nikos Kazantzakis went on pilgrimage that one Holy Week and got on a boat to the Holy Land, and with it many other pilgrims on their way to Jerusalem, reading the story and crying out as they heard it. And then he goes with all the pilgrims to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, back to the rafters with pilgrims who are clinging virtually to the walls when the Archbishop goes into the sanctum sanctorum, hidden from view from everyone else, and at midnight emerges with a fistful of candles miraculously kindled by the risen Christ. And suddenly the room is ablaze with candles. I would be terrified. And everyone in the room saying, Christos anesti! Christ is risen. It is a drama. It's a curtain opener, though, this Palm Sunday. The entry of the most important characters, of course. And like all dramas, whoever shows up in splendor in the first act is likely to go out on a stretcher in the last. Oedipus shows up, the king of Thebes, having saved the city from the beast of the Sphinx, and at the end of the play has blinded himself at the horror of his own crimes. One of my favorite operatic pieces is the prologue to the story of Boris Godunov, the usurper czar who reluctantly took the throne but waited for the crowd to implore him as they cheered, Slava, Slava, hail Boris! And he says, all right, I'll take the crown, but only for you. They thrill to his assent, and at the end of the opera, he lies dead, killed by his own fear and guilt. And so we know the end of this story, too. What starts in triumph will end in loss and misery, capped by mystery. Why does the church, though, get all wound up about Palm Sunday? We know what's coming. Shouldn't we be aware of the story by now? Well, because like the pilgrims on the boat or the actors at Opera Macau, we want to be part of the drama, not just watch it. 50 years ago, my school librarian recruited me to be in the Baltimore City Easter pageant. Why, I do not know. I'm a good Unitarian, but it sounded like a fun thing to do, and so I got up at 4 in the morning, took the number 3 bus down to Memorial Stadium, which has now been obliterated. That's where the Orioles used to play in the Baltimore Colts. So we were on the field as we played out this great drama. Now, being a husky boy of about 6 feet tall, I was immediately conscripted into the role of Simon the Cyrenian. Anyone remember him? He's the fellow that when Jesus falls is given the cross to carry. So I'm dragging this immense cross all the way across the outfield out there by the track, just before you get to the home run fence. And I did it with great conviction. At least a couple of years. Then I wanted a break, so then they made me a Roman guard who was bedazzled at the end of the story. But I was in the story. And if I didn't take it literally, I kind of got caught up in it. And I think that's the point. We want to get caught up in these dramas. We don't want to just watch them. We want to care. We want to think that it's meaningful and that we're meaningful. As I pointed out, Lent ends this week. And each week I explore different ways for skeptics, liberals, and other heretics to get something out of it. And they each involve doing something. Not just thinking about something. Make your own bread, seeing life as a pilgrimage, giving your things away. Doesn't matter. And I saved the pilgrim story for last because we can look at Palm Sunday as the end of a long pilgrimage that Jesus himself was taking, wandering through the Galilee for 3 years. Matthew quotes Jesus as saying along the way, foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. He was all but homeless. Or he was on pilgrimage, on his way somewhere. Not a direct line back and forth, but we know in the story he's supposed to end up here. And most of you know, as I pointed out, that I'm a sometime pilgrim, and you've heard me recount some of them. There is something deeply good for me in this practice, which is why the genius of the liberal church is you get to choose your spiritual practice, the one that feeds you, not to satisfy some authority's notion of what matters. We won't tell you what it is, but we'll help you find it. And yes, I do harbor a dream of walking the Via Francigena that goes from Canterbury to Rome. If I'm going to do it, I better do it sooner than later, because these legs have only so many miles left in them. We all want our lives to have a sense of direction and purpose. And religions offer that in many ways, including these dramas that we watch, these pilgrimages people go, where we can enter a story, walk a path that gives us at least a temporary sense that it all matters, that our lives somehow fit into a larger scheme we can only hope exists. Later this month, Jews around the world will reenact the Passover, not by going to Egypt and leaving, but by telling the story to their youngest members and to themselves, with food and prayers and stories. And when someone asks a young person, why do we do it? The answer will be, because this is how God delivered us from Egypt, to identify across the centuries with those folks themselves. And it's not just that little bit, because the story goes beyond the Red Sea and the miracles. It goes to Sinai, and it goes beyond that to the wanderings in the desert. And of course, our Muslim friends this summer, when it's least hospitable, will be asked to make their pilgrimage to Mecca, to reenact, to take part in, to enter the drama of their own story. We all long to be part of something that says we matter in some way, that we're part of something that endures beyond ourselves. And that's where Paul comes in. He spends a lot of his time in the letter to Rome expounding on sin and salvation, which is why I've talked about it so much. But as he reaches this point in chapter 8, he turns to why this matters. I consider that the sufferings of the present time are not worth comparing to the glory about to be revealed to us, he says. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. Did you hear him say eager longing? Have you ever wanted to get to your destination? Eager longing. He goes on, we know that the whole creation has been groaning in labor pains until now. And not only creation, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit. We're getting closer, he says. You can almost taste it. Keep going. And then those beautiful words, who will separate us from the love of Christ? Will hardship or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? Do not give up hope, he says. And believe me, I've climbed some very slippery hills, and the only thing that kept me going was that I had to go. And then came those words that I've used in memorial services for even the most profound of skeptics, because they have inside of them an essential human hope. For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God. That poem says that we are bound for something. I don't know what, but we all wish it to be true. The contemporary Hindu-Jewish teacher Ram Dass says the same thing in much simpler ways, which is the way all truths can be expressed if we give them time. And I thank Meredith for reminding me. We are walking each other home. Our pilgrimage through life is together, toward a destination we both fear and anticipate. So then why am I talking about Emily Dickinson? How did she end up here? Well, she's exactly the opposite in so many ways. She became a recluse. She barely left her house for most of her life. To a psychologist, I guess she'd be agoraphobic. But I think she is a true pilgrim. Or was she like, in this case, maybe she was like a secular Teresa of Avila. If you don't know her story, she was cloistered as a nun for her visions. In Avila, not Amherst, but the two of them shared a kind of enclosed life. But I don't think she was hid away, either one of them, or walled off from life at all. No, that would be exactly the wrong idea. I believe that Dickinson had what I might call a kind of spiritual albinism. That is to say, her spirit was her skin, and every sound and sight penetrated all the way in. There was no sunscreen for the world for her. It all was vivid. Far from hiding from the world, I think Dickinson could not keep any of it out. Even the simplest things were momentous. You and I, we have to go away on pilgrimage. We have to explore. We have to enrich. We have to go beyond the obvious because we're tired of it. But Dickinson and others, the world came in all the time, every sound and smell and sight. They traveled by standing still and letting it all penetrate to the bone. She was a pilgrim who let the world come to her because it was all there, all right there. Her spiritual cousin, if you will, William Blake, wrote to see the world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower. That's what Dickinson does. She is the pilgrim who lets the world come to her, who lets the Spirit meet the world. And so I think this is what Paul experienced, whether on the road to Damascus or elsewhere. A moment when he was transparent to reality, and it all came in, bathing with light, blinding with light, transforming, touching, bruising, burning. Do not seek such a thing. No wise or sane person would. But when it comes to you, it is undeniable. And once you've had it, you can never not have had it. Paul, Ramdas, Jesus, unnamed thousands, men and women both, who have experienced that pilgrim moment when the universe opened and poured itself into them, dazzling so much they could barely blink to keep it out. Tell me the whole truth, we say, but please tell it slant, lest we be dazzled beyond our capacity and made blind. Let me walk slowly toward the light. No. For some, it comes to them with blinding beauty. And we look to them to be guided on our dark ways, hoping that even a small slant glance will show us the way. But let me give her the last word, not only for this sermon, but to this preacher. Some keep the Sabbath going to church. I keep it staying at home, with a bobolink for a chorister and an orchard for a dome. Some keep the Sabbath in surplice. I just wear my wings, and instead of tolling the bell for church, our little sexton sings. God preaches, a noted clergyman, and the sermon is never long. So instead of getting to heaven at last, I'm going all along. Is that not the pilgrim life? Friends, let us be going all along toward that light, which even in this slanted reality we love, leads us onward toward hope. Let me now pause before saying amen to lift up the names of those who in their lives have been dear to us and in the conclusion of their lives have left a legacy of love and blessing. I pray each week that they remain within our hearts as they are within our times, that their blessing may continue to bestow upon us a gravity and a gladness. I lift up Mary Swain, and Joan Newberry, Rita Melver Pifko, Ruth Emmerich, Walter Bagby, and Harvey Ribbons. El-Malay Rachamim, Shokim Barachamim, Hamad Semenuha, God filled with mercy, dwelling in the heavens' heights, bring proper rest beneath the wings of your Shekhinah to the souls of our beloveds and our blameless, who have gone to their eternal place of rest. May you, who are a source of mercy, shelter them beneath your wings eternally, bind their souls to you and to we the living, that they may rest at peace, and we may be at peace, and let us say Amen. And so, friends, let us all say Amen first in song as we enter this pilgrim week of the Spirit. Join with me now and with one another as we sing number 263, When Jesus Looked from Olivet. Who said, "Friend, I have lost the way. The way leads on. Is there another way? The way is one. I must retrace the track. Oh, it's lost and gone. Back, I must travel back. None goes there, none. Then here I'll make my place. No, the road runs on. Stand still and set my face. The road leaps on. Stay here, forever stay. None stays here, none. I cannot find the way. The way leads on. The way leads on, and each day we resume that path, that pilgrim track through truth and hope, knowing that this day and every day is a gift which the Lord has made. And so we ever are rejoicing and glad in it. Amen and amen.